This is SciByte, episode 114 for January 7th, 2014. Hi everyone, and welcome to SciByte, Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly science podcast, live on a Tuesday and fresh on a Wednesday over at jupiterbroadcasting.com. My name is Chris, and joining us every week is our excellent host, Heather. Hey there, Heather.
Hey there, Chris.
Hey, Heather, happy science to you.
Happy science.
So what are we going to talk about in our first episode of 2014?
Today, we're going to take a look at my top science stories and events of 2013, check some curiosity news, and as always, take a peek back into history and up in the sky this week.
Oh, kind of like a Heather's Choice. I'm looking forward to it. So let's kick it off with the news. Where do we start tonight?
In a completely unbiased and completely on the line choice, Curiosity rover and all of its evidence of ancient habitable water locations.
Oh, yeah, for sure, right?
Yeah, well,
story.
it wasn't just me. Like pretty much all of the websites that I was looking out for their ideas of, top science 2013 had Curiosity. A number of them had them at the top, at the top 5 at the very least. But of the whole mission of Curiosity, it landed last year. That was so awesome. It was definitely on my list of, I think it was my number 2 from last year. And so they landed there, and the whole goal was to see, can we find habitable, places where there could have been life, livable water. And yes, within months it had that. It continued to have it. It saw, in January it had some calcium-rich deposits that look pretty much just like they do here on Earth. And in March there was some more places that they saw minerals that are present in lake beds. And later in the year they had, saw the scoops of soil they analyzed were actually several percent water by weight, which means there is at least a decent amount of water in the soil now. And they'd seen that, there had been ancient lakes that it could have been a couple of feet deep, possibly covered in a thin sheet of ice, but for hundreds of thousands of years, over the course of time, that there was a lot of water there that had all the right chemical ingredients. It had, it wasn't just, it was, one of the things that they called it was, tap water. It was drinking water. If it had been there, then, it would have been a little iron-rich water. But, it was there. It was just continually every once in a while, just like, hey, we found new. Hey, we found new. And it got to one point where you're like, okay, so this whole area is water. We know that. Where's the excitement coming now? And it's kind of sad because you're like, okay, I need to step up.
I guess so. Although it feels like that first step is one giant leap. No, I'm sorry. No, but that first step
giant
is
roll of a wheel for rover kind.
Oh, nice, Heather, nice. You got where I was going. And it makes you think, like, the first thing it does when I heard this story was immediately, like, images of a more primitive Mars, maybe covered in water or with beautiful lakes pop into mind, and like picturing like maybe Mars with a little bit of greenery on it, looks a little closer to Earth. Gives you it stirs all kinds of images.
Well, we've seen, these orbital images where we say, this really looks like, this crater had water in it and it broke off here and, came out to alluvial fan and, we could see like, this is what we think on Earth. It would be like a river here and, this is all sorts of, water locations, and thinking like, this looks like what this happened.
Right.
Like on Earth, we'd say that, but now we've been there. We've scooped up the dirt. We've analyzed it right there on the surface, and we're like, yes, this area is what we think it was, and we're just kind of analyzing it as we go along. And it's a much wider area. We right where they landed, they're like, hooray, there's some here, and the kit just kept trucking and trucking and trucking, and they still find it.
Yeah, that was the other thing, isn't it? Is it really was a validation of the location they picked to land. It really sort of was the garden spot.
Oh, yeah, it was great. And they're heading towards the mountain in the middle of this crater. And so they're going to be able to see as they climb up that's kind of a geological time time scale, their own little
time capsule in a sense. We go back and look at different stages.
Look back at different stages and time periods in Mars's history.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, it's been such a success, and they've been so forward with this that they're actually kind of, I think I mentioned it a few episodes ago, where they're going, all right, well, now we're going to kind of tweak the systems as we can and look to see if we can actually see, the chemicals that are there for, that microbial life would need.
Mm-hmm.
Not just a place that, they could go and live. Hey, that's a great vacation place,
Mm-hmm.
Let's look and see if there's evidence that all the little pieces were there for it to live. So they're kind of retweaking down to see, all right, well, we've definitely had the big check mark of everything. So now let's see how far we can go with this.
And really over the entire 2013, this was an interesting story. I think one of the first episodes we talked about it, or maybe not the first, but one of the episodes we definitely talked about it was SciByte 78. That's January 22nd of 2013. And then again in 86, which was in March, 104 in October, and then of course in December there was episode 112, and there was coverage in between there too. It's been a really interesting arc of this little rover's journey.
Yeah, I mean, I just pulled out a handful of the episodes where it was the significant, hey, we found water, or hey, we found, some major events.
Right.
I mean, we have the Curiosity News. It's pretty much something happens almost every week that I can speak to.
Yeah.
But those were just the handful of episodes that it was really big, habitable water.
One of those things that reminds you, it is really 2014. We have,
oh my gosh,
we have all these kinds of awesome things going on.
Yep.
And it's still going to be a great source of good info. All right, Heather, well, any other thoughts on that one?
No, just keep rolling along.
Just keep on roving. All right.
Okay.
Nice. All right. Well, I want to take just a quick little pause right here. I got a book pick. I actually didn't pick this up in 2013, but is one of my favorite books. I might have got this in 2013. It would have been really early in 2013. It's called Area 51, An Uncensored History of America's Top Military Secret Base. Now, when you hear that title, you're probably thinking, oh, it's about aliens or something. But it actually is not. It is written and narrated by Annie Jacobson, and she did something that is just so rare these days. She did some really deep dive investigations for this book. Annie Jacobson had exclusive access to 20 men who served on the base proudly, and she also had unprecedented access to 55 additional military and intelligence personnel, scientists, pilots, and engineers, 32 of which who lived there and worked there for extended periods of time. She goes into some of the Cold War underpinnings and roots of Area 51, like the spy planes, all of the amazing amount of work they had to do when the Soviets got satellites and were trying to fly over Area 51 and monitor them. It's such a great book. I'll play a little sample of it. We'll see what we get here.
The United States. To understand how black projects began and how they continue to function today, one must start with the creation of the atomic bomb. The men who ran the Manhattan Project wrote the rules about black operations. The atomic bomb was the mother of all black projects, and it is the parent from which all black operations have sprung. Building the bomb was the single most expensive engineering project in the history of the United States. It began in 1942, and by the time the bomb was tested inside the White Sands Proving Ground in the New Mexico High Desert on July 16, 1945, the bomb's price tag, adjusted for inflation, was $28 billion.
Ooh, there's so much great info in this book. I remember reading this book and thinking, this is a genuine historical education. And because of these interviews and these documents that she had access to, this book literally has information that had never been published before. And you might be able to find it in bits and pieces online now, just because it might have worked its way out. But having one consecutive authoritative place to get it all was really a super compelling read. So it's called Area 51, An Uncensored History of America's Top Secret Military Base. We'll have a link towards the top of the SciByte show notes. If you grab that link and you're not yet an Audible member, you can get this book for free. Plus, we'll also get an affiliate revenue from that. And if you decide to cancel your Audible membership, you can still keep that book and play it at your leisure. So it's a pretty good deal if you're not an Audible member. And if you are an Audible member, you got a credit burning a hole in your account, go spend it on that book. It is fantastic. I really recommend it. fact, after talking about it a little bit, I kind of want to read it again. Kind of want to. It's definitely in the reread category, or I guess re-listen category. All right, Heather. Well, with those notes done, you know what that means? It's time for the news bite. I said it's time for the.
Come on, fellas.
This is the problem when you
have this is a mighty hangover from New Year's party, guys.
It's budget cutbacks, It's budget, yeah. All right, I said it's time for the news bite.
There we go.
Okay, you see? They're into it now, Heather. It just takes them a little reminder. All right, so what are we talking about in the news bite?
All right, the next big science thing that I wanted to talk about was Voyager I, the entering interstellar space announcement.
Oh, gosh, yes.
Yeah, well, this is again one of those things where it's, have they announced it? I don't know. Are they telling the truth? Right. Have they announced it? Well, it was one of those things where perception was that there was like an announcement every once in a while that said, we have actually entered interstellar space. But it was actually in September that NASA gave the official, hey, yes, we actually have data from previous year that says we entered a new region of the edge of the solar system where all the readings were changing fairly rapidly. There is overwhelming evidence that it has crossed into what they call a heliopause. Now, it's just like another layer out there. Now, one thing that they didn't see was a magnetic field direction change. But they expected that to happen, but they haven't seen it happen. Again, this is one of those things where, what do you call interstellar? Mm-hmm. Now, if you go all the way out to, the Oort cloud, which is where all the little baby possible comets could live, this collection of a sphere of all these little things, it is a long, 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 long way out. Hundreds of maybe 1,000, I don't know.
Billions and billions of miles.
Yes.
How was that for my Carl Sagan? Was that okay? Was that all right?
That was pretty good.
Okay.
That was pretty good.
All right.
But we're not entering that. We're not. So it's all about, I put it in quotations, interstellar space. But yeah, we've definitely hit a major barrier. We've crossed a major threshold there. And that in itself was just pretty amazing.
And it's the result, the collective work of a generation worth of scientists who started on this project and have been there, or some of them are still there. And then here we are getting to report on it now, like as breaking the fruits of that labor. It's so awesome.
Yeah.
And it's only achievable because we made that investment so long ago.
Oh, yeah.
And it's one of those long tail things that, back then, there probably was some that didn't ever think we'd see the results of that. But here we are enjoying it.
Yeah.
That was a huge story. Well, there was also, speaking of a way out there, exoplanets were making a big splash in 2013.
Oh, yeah. There were all sorts of different things. I have clumped a number of things together for the exoplanets. It was looking at, years of the Kepler data, they started saying, well, how common are these? And they were decided that, hey, actually analysis says that 22% of stars like ours have potentially habitable Earth-sized planets.
Wow.
Now, they may not be rocky, they may not have liquid water, but there is the possibility of a planet about our size that could have all the stuff. And at 22% of stars like ours, that was a pretty impressive number for us.
Mm-hmm.
Just the amount of exoplanets that we're really looking at, wow, how many are out there? And not only be able to see that, but we're able to take a picture of some clouds. Between the Kepler and the Spitzer Space Telescope, they're able to create this sort of a cloud map. I was looked at that back in October, SciByte 105, and it was, there was this data where they weren't able to actually see, they're like, hey, there's a bright spot. Now, is that shining off a cloud or is that heat?
One of the things that was sort of amazing is even from this distance, we found the hints of ammonia and methane and carbon dioxide in the exoplanet's atmospheres.
Yeah, we're able to, the planet is passing in front of the star, we're able to read the starlight passing through that atmosphere.
Yeah.
In order to get that spectrum reading, and to be able to really analyze these. And we're able to analyze them in so much better detail now.
That's kind of incredible. And I guess we've also, if I recall, we listened to a star?
Yes, that's what they called it. It was they actually were being able to measure the oscillations of the star's brightness caused by what they called starquakes.
Yeah.
which like the planet whipping around this star was making making it, have these little quakes or shake a little bit.
Okay.
And they're able to listen to that oscillation in itself to be able to say, hey, we think there is this size and moving here. And it was really the smallest one yet to be found from all the Kepler data.
And of course, 2013 taught us that as we move out into space, likely if you and I are ever going to get to go anywhere, it's going to be on a private space, I guess, spaceship. It's kind of crazy to call them that, but international and private space travel in 2013, I know that was a popular topic on the show.
Oh, yeah. I mean, typically you think, especially here in the continental US, you think, all right, it's NASA.
Yeah.
NASA brings us to space.
Right.
Or maybe the Russians. The Russians, we pay them to taxi our astronauts up to the space station.
Right.
There was a lot of people doing stuff. We had India's Mars orbiter mission. We were talking about it in 109, 107, 111,
Yeah,
in October to December. That was their first ever Mars probe. And they had, this idea where like, well, we don't have all the money to go straight, one shot here to Mars. So they did that where they did some slingshotting around the Earth, making bigger and bigger elliptical orbits until they could get the speed to shoot off to Mars. So it was, doing it on a different budget and a different scale, saying, hey, but we're still getting there.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, in December, talking about China's lunar lander.
Right.
They were actually able to land the probe. They had the little U2, I don't know how to properly pronounce it, the rover. It rolled out. It's taking some pictures. I believe it's in its little lunar nighttime now. It was, last time I checked on it, it was either entering or it was preparing for its 2-week deep freeze.
Okay.
So we'll see what happens to that on the other side of that.
Mm-hmm.
We had, we hear a lot of talk about SpaceX, but Bigelow Aeroscience, actually, they had talked about it a long time ago, back in last January, where it was inflatable space station modules.
Oh, right. SciByte 77.
Yes, where they were, talking about these, and NASA had actually awarded them contracts to make them these things. So, it's still NASA, but it's them going out and saying, hey, you guys have a great idea. Can we, we'd like to purchase this from you. So it's really farming it out to the private industry. And of course, you have, the SpaceX and everybody making trips up to the space station, delivering all the cargo. And in, on December 3rd, they had the geostationary orbit, which meant it was a much higher orbit in a different type of situation where it offers them the chance to launch large commercial satellites.
Mm.
So they can really get up there and actually start competing against Europe and Russia to haul these really big telecommunication satellites into orbit. So it's really about branching out into all these different, private and kind of branching out all across the globe about reaching out into space and doing these things.
It's interesting too. Like I'm looking at the geostationary orbit story. That was December 3rd, right?
Yeah.
So, the Bigelow Aerospace stuff was January 11th. So it really spans the whole year.
Oh yeah.
It was 2013 was really the year private space really took off.
Oh yeah. Ta-da. There we go. Look at that.
I like that.
Yeah.
All right, Heather. Any other thoughts on that stuff?
No, I don't think so.
All right, well then, band, come back in here because we're going to move on to the 2-Byte News. All right, Heather, what are we talking about in the 2-Byte News?
All right, got a couple of science events from last year that I saw. Talked about exoplanet searching, and unfortunately, that leads us to recall the poor Kepler Space Telescope.
Oh, yes.
Yep. Back in January of last year, it started having some, what they call their reaction wheel problems. They have, 4 wheels that had to keep it precisely pointed towards this group of stars to watch, for the dimming of the starlight. One crashed out in 2012. So they had to have 3 in order to keep the proper pointing precision that they needed.
Mm-hmm.
And so a second one started causing problems, back in January. They're able to kind of rest it, and then it got back to work. It kind of started giving them problems again in May, And then by the time August rolls around, they're like, yeah, it looks like it's not coming back up. So they ended its primary mission. They officially gave an end to the primary mission statement. Still have years of data worth to go back through the catalog. And they're actually sort of going forward with what they're calling K2 second light, which is, now Kepler doesn't orbit Earth. It orbits the sun in kind of an, like, in an Earth location-ish. So it's trailing us.
Okay.
So what they're able to do is, and when the sun is pouring out, it's pouring out all this photons and things, it allows some pressure. And so they're going to be able to do is sort of angle the telescope just right so that pressure can offer them sort of a crutch to make up for a third wheel.
That's amazing.
So it's not as good. And I think they're only at, I don't recall the exact percentage of how close they're getting, but they're able to kind of get that point.
That's incredible.
Get to a little bit further and see, like, well, how good can we get?
Mm-hmm. That's so smart, so ingenious. Now, you remember that big story, and the thing that really sticks out at me is all those dash cams that the Russians had in their cars of the meteor just coming down through the sky. That was a heck of a story.
Chelyabinsk meteorite down in Russia. Yes, I remember that.
Yeah.
Coming down, and you had all this crazy stuff going on. And then I remember at the very beginning, they're like, oh, wow, there's this giant hole in the ice. And everyone going, I don't know, is that just, what is that about? And then we did. We ended up finding after quite a bit of a searching, they found the huge chunk of that meteorite down in the bottom of that lake. And it was all things as you went along, and it did make it so much more exciting because you had so many different video views of all those dash cams.
And it was such a brilliant, like, burning across the sky kind of thing, too.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's one of those things where I'm like, wow, if I'd been driving and I saw that bright a light and saw something streaking across the sky, what would I have done?
Yeah, I think here in the U.S. we'd think it was a terrorist attack.
There were some people who thought that.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, it looks like a missile almost going. And the other thing that you have to remember about that is it wasn't like there was advanced warning, right?
No, there's not really advanced warning when it comes to these things.
Yeah, so it was just all of a sudden, boom, meteor crash. It's such a great one. And so everything Heather's talking about today, she has lots of links in the show notes, previous episodes we talked about, all that kind of stuff, including the visuals of the meteorite coming down across the road, and that brilliant just lights up the whole road because of those dash cams, and then you see it streak off into the distance. It was pretty compelling stuff. There's this video is great because it has a whole collection of it too, and it just wow, the whole area as it comes through just lights up. Wow, it looks exactly like a missile. I wonder what it sounded like.
I don't remember anything anyone talk about it.
Yeah.
That particular amount, but I remember there are some videos of where it's at certain points where it blew out windows.
Yes.
And one actually where it blew out the back bay door.
Right.
Of one of those, and it's like, hey, I have one of those, and I have one of those at my work. Those doors aren't skimpy.
Right. Yeah, it puts it in perspective, doesn't it? Very interesting stuff. All right, Heather, well, any other thoughts on those events?
No, just kind of looking forward to what we got this year.
Well, while we're talking about stuff rocketing through space, why don't we do a little curiosity update? Are you ready?
I'm ready.
And liftoff of the Atlas V with Curiosity.
Touchdown confirmed. We're safe on
Okay, Heather. So what's Curiosity up to?
All right. Start of the show at the top. Curiosity, yep. Still chucking it on and doing stuff. We have had a third upgrade to the software now, which is now the switching over to the new software took about a week, just because you want to very carefully switch things over in such a way that it's not a one-way trip.
Yeah, it's hard to do a tech support call on Mars.
Yeah, hard to do a hard reboot.
Yeah.
There's no person.
Yeah.
The time scale for having someone go out there and hold the power button is a few years.
That'd be a heck of a support contract, wouldn't it?
Oh, yeah. You're like, yeah, I'll go there, push the button for you. But so now we've got some upcoming activity. They were able to take a picture of one of the wheels. Now, because of the problems with the other rovers getting stuck in the soft sand, you saw those, grips on the wheels, and you're like, oh, it's going to leave, dots and dashes in the sand below it. But actually, the terrain has been kind of rough on it, and the wheels are actually showing a bit of wear.
Oh.
So they've kind of stopped, paused. They're kind of really analyzing how the wheels are looking. Now, it's not scary levels, but it's much more than they would have expected at this point. So now they're kind of reanalyzing, retweaking the driving software and their choices about how to lay out to pick as smooth a patches as possible to keep driving on. So it kind of they can kind of save the wheels as long as they can.
Yeah. Well, that is a little interesting element because it's gone pretty smooth. There's been a couple of hiccups. I didn't even think about the wheels.
I know.
Yeah.
It was one of those things where I'm like, hey, I just noticed that there's not a lot of, sand or anything for it to get caught up in. But I saw that story and I was like, oh yeah, I suppose that the wheels can get beat up too if they're driving over lots of rocks.
Thankfully, I don't have any wheels on the time machine. You want to jump in? You ready to go?
Let's go.
All right, here we go.
Okay.
Nice and smooth because it hovers the whole way. Oh yeah, see that? That's nice. And when we take these short trips, it's just a nice gentle touchdown because this week we're just going 59 years back to January 11th, 1954. Heather, what happened this week in science?
We had the first UK TV weather broadcast. We had InVision weather forecaster from BBC's Lime Grove Studios. Hand-drawn weather charts pinned to an easel.
Wow.
But looking at the weather here in the
winter vortex, as we call it, I believe.
Yes, the polar vortex of coldness.
Polar, that's right. Yeah, the polar vortex.
I just kind of saw this and I'm like, weather broadcasts warns you that horrible temperatures are coming your way and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it except bundle more up.
I'm amazed. I'm actually kind of impressed. It was, not only to say it like this, but 59 years ago doesn't seem like that long. It seems like they would have had weather broadcasts before then. But I can only imagine like setting something up like that, the visual spectacle of it. They needed to have maps, they needed to have diagrams. It was probably a big chore to bite off at first.
But it was really the fact that it was like hand-drawn charts and you had it on an easel.
I kind of like that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
It's like nowadays you have all the weather people kind of pointing and so the
green screen
camera kind of picks up and draws where they're pointing.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, back in their day they actually had to have a pen to scribble.
They actually had to draw. All right, Heather, well, let me recalibrate the SciByte 2000 so we can look up into the sky this week.
Alrighty, this week, stay warm if you're out late at night. But on Friday, January the 10th, around nightfall, to the left of the moon, you might be able to see the Pleiades star cluster.
Ooh.
It's, and about by 8 or 9, it'll be above the moon. Now, it's a number of, I think it's 7 stars all grouped together. Now, if you have really good eyes, you'll probably only see 6. But if you have really good eyes and it's really dark, you might be able to see the 7. But they kind of just look like almost a fuzzball of stars. And that was interesting because at one point they used to decide archers based upon that. They're like, how many stars do you see? It was the eye chart of ancient Rome.
That is so interesting. And it does almost look a little fuzzy to me, like it's a little bit of group of stars that are slightly out of focus.
Yep, even with my glasses, they are too. On Saturday, January the 11th at dusk, over by the moon, just below it, it'll be the orange giant star Aldebaran, which is the eye of the constellation of Taurus. And it'll be to the left of the moon by about 11. But that came up because it won't be Mars. That is just an orange giant star Aldebaran on Saturday. In general this week, Venus is hiding in the glare of the sun this week. It's fairly close to the sun. It's within a couple degrees. I don't really suggest anyone try to go view it. I saw some places they were going, hey, this is try to view this. I'm like, no, let's not.
It's too cold.
Well, it's too close to the sun.
Oh, that too.
If you're trying to take a telescope out there, why not? Don't take your chances.
Yeah.
And look too close to the sun at all.
Yeah.
So Mars, around midnight, it's going to be highest in the south just before the first light of dawn.
Hey-o.
And with it, you've got Spica to its lower left. Jupiter this week. It rises at sunset, It'll be highest in the sky about midnight. In the evening, it is going to be the brightest object in the sky. Actually, on January the 5th, it is in opposition. Well, we just passed opposition, which means it's directly opposite the sun from our perspective, which is why it's rising at sunset, all night long. It's going to be up there to be seen.
That's awesome.
And Saturn is going to be over there at dawn in the southeast, way to the far lower left of Mars and Spica.
All right, that is actually some good stuff. I'm looking forward to seeing if I can I Spy some Jupiter action. That'll be great, especially when it's nice and bright. So this week's episode, lots of really great links. And if you're a new listener to SciByte and you kind of want a crash course on some of the highlights over 2013, a lot of the stuff that we briefly covered in this episode is covered in greater detail, and those individual episodes are linked all throughout the show notes, usually multiple times. You could have yourself a great series of shows if you just go through the show notes and grab those episodes, put them on your podcast player, and just kind of get through those. You'll get some of the science highlights of 2013, so that'd be a great resource. Heather, thanks for compiling all this stuff. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
All right, well, is there anything else we need to cover before we get out of here this week?
Don't think so.
All right, very good. Well, we'd love to hear your feedback. You can go to jupiterbroadcasting.com and click the contact link. You can also follow Heather on Twitter. She's JB_Mars_base. Heather, thanks for the great show.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of SciByte. We'll see you right back here next week.